Before we move further into this story, tell us in the comments if you've ever been judged before someone knew your story. Maria Bennett sat behind the wheel of her dusty blue sedan, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles ached. The flashing red and blue lights in her rear view weren't just bright, they felt like they were burning holes in the back of her head. She pulled over exactly where the officer told her, under the dim glow of a flickering streetlight, just outside the quiet strip of small-town shops. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am," the officer ordered, voice firm, clipped. "Hands where I can see them." Maria obeyed, moving slow, not out of guilt, but because the weight of the day had already hollowed her out. She'd just left the memorial service for her husband, Sergeant David Bennett, a military police officer killed in the line of duty 6 months earlier. She was still wearing her black dress and silver necklace, his last anniversary gift before deployment. But the officer didn't know that. He didn't see the folded flag in her passenger seat or the funeral program on the dashboard. When Maria stepped out, the officer immediately reached for her wrist. "I'm going to need you to step to the front of the vehicle," he said, pulling her forward. She opened her mouth to ask why, but before the words came, his hand brushed against the necklace. The chain snapped. The small silver pendant, engraved with "Always Come Home," fell to the pavement with a sharp, tiny sound. Maria froze. Her breath caught, her eyes locked on the broken chain at her feet. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt something inside her crack. Tears welled up, unbidden. She wasn't just crying over a piece of jewelry, she was crying over the last tangible thing she had left of him. Maria stood still, staring at the pendant on the ground as if moving would shatter her entirely. The officer noticed her tears, his brows pulling together, a flicker of confusion breaking his rigid expression. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked, voice softening just slightly. She swallowed hard, bending slowly to pick up the necklace. Her fingers trembled. "That was my husband's," she said quietly, not looking up. "He gave it to me the week before he didn't come home." The officer froze. "I'm sorry." He took a step back, as if distance could undo what had just happened. From the corner of her eye, Maria noticed another cruiser pull up. A second officer stepped out, older, with the kind of posture only decades in uniform could give. His gaze swept over the scene, the broken necklace in Maria's hand, the first officer's awkward stance, the folded flag in the car. The older officer's eyes narrowed. "Bennett?" he asked, voice almost a whisper. Maria looked up, surprised. "I served with a Sergeant David Bennett," he continued, stepping closer. "Military police, right? Iraq, 2010? Her breath hitched. "Yes, that was my husband." The older officer's jaw tightened, his voice lowering. "He saved my life in Mosul." He turned sharply to the younger officer. "Do you have any idea who you just pulled over?" The younger man shook his head, suddenly pale. "She's the widow of one of the most honorable MPs this country ever had," the older officer said, voice rising. "And you've got her standing here like she's a suspect." The air between them thickened. The flashing lights suddenly felt like a spotlight, illuminating every wrong assumption made in the last 5 minutes. The older officer straightened, then did something no one expected. He removed his hat and placed it over his heart. Maria blinked, unsure what to say. The younger officer shifted uncomfortably, glancing between them. "Sir, I didn't know," he murmured. "That's the problem," the older officer said sharply, never taking his eyes off Maria. "You didn't ask. You assumed. And you broke something that can't be replaced." The silence that followed was heavy, the only sound the faint hum of idling engines and the whisper of wind through the street. The older officer stepped closer to Maria, his voice gentler now. "Ma'am, on behalf of every officer who's ever worn a badge, I'm sorry." Maria looked down at the necklace in her hand, the broken chain curling in her palm like a scar. She closed her fingers around it and nodded, her tears finally slowing. "My husband believed in honor," she said softly. "Not just the kind you wear, but the kind you live." She glanced at the younger officer. "Sometimes that means seeing before you judge." The older officer gave a firm nod, then, without a word, snapped into a sharp, formal salute. It was the same salute her husband had received at his funeral. Maria's throat tightened, but she returned it, her hand steady. In that moment, the street didn't feel like a place of humiliation, it felt like sacred ground. The younger officer lowered his gaze, his voice barely audible. "I'll remember this." Later that week, someone's phone video surfaced online. Millions saw the broken necklace, the salute, and the widow who carried her dignity like armor. But Maria didn't chase interviews or hashtags. She simply fixed her necklace, put it back on, and kept living as her husband had taught her, with quiet strength.